What's happening, guys? Jacob here. Welcome back to Robski Football and welcome back to another preview and predict video. This time around for game week 35 in the Premier League. Obviously, looking back from last weekend, we did have a decreased amount of Premier League fixtures because of the FA Cup semi-finals going on, but nonetheless, we did have a few, eye-raising and eyebrow-raising, I should say, results. Liverpool getting the win in the first Merseyside derby at the New Hill Dickinson Stadium. Sunderland losing 5-0 at home to a rejuvenated Nottingham Forest, who look like they are, they've got that belief around them now as a squad that they can pull themselves away from this relegation battle and also trying to push through to a Europa League semi-final. And then West Ham as well, obviously in a slightly iffy circumstances given a few of the decisions that went down in that game against Everton. They won 2-1 and again getting some much needed points for their relegation battle as well. So I will say, first of all, I am recording this after the Arsenal versus Atletico semi-final, but before the Villa and Forest Europa League semi-final tomorrow. So I have taken that into account given this weekend's fixtures. But nonetheless, let's go straight into the predictions. So, first up on the list, we have Leeds versus Burnley. Now, Leeds, of course, were in the FA Cup semi-final against Chelsea. At the weekend, they did end up losing quite narrowly. For me, going into that game just briefly, Chelsea, looked like a side that, around the squad, they knew the job that they had to do. All they needed was someone just to point them in the right direction, not to overcomplicate the tactics or the approach to the game, but approach it as you would any FA Cup semi-final or any trophy semi-final and get the job done, which they did indeed. Leeds, on the other hand, were a little bit lackluster, I think, going forward, but they did have a few chances that if on another day they could have been taken, and it would have led to a much more, I guess, thrilling game for spectators. Anyway, going into this Leeds versus Burnley game, obviously Burnley lost narrowly to City last week, losing only 1-0. They did obviously face a lot of shots, a lot of attacking play from City, and were fortunate, I would say, to only concede one goal. But that's obviously a lot down to Martin Dubravka's performance in that game. Leeds, again, they are a team now that look pretty comfortable in terms of the relegation battle, but I think Farke will still want to get a bit more of a cushion just to see the season out and end it on a high, or as much as a high as possible for Leeds. For this game, though, again, given Burnley's dire form of late, but obviously throughout the season, and Leeds at home, knowing what they can do and seeing what they did against Wolves in the Premier League last time out, I'm going to go for a 3-0 victory as well. They did it against Wolves. They will probably do it against Burnley in terms of opening them up and being clinical with the chances that they create. And we go on to Brentford versus West Ham. Now, Brentford, as I have been with on Twitter and with friends in conversation, I've been very very full of praise for Keith Andrews as a whole over the season. I mean, taking Thomas Frank out of that team and the players like Mbumo and Visser leaving and Norgard as well. People, including myself, saw the worst for Brentford going into the season, but they've done very well indeed, albeit over the last 8 to 10 games since the the end of February time, they haven't won a game and they have kind of become draw masters themselves. Against Man United, they did have some chances here and there that they could have grabbed a point or maybe even all 3 points, but it just wasn't to be on that occasion. And then going against this West Ham team is going to be no easy feat either. West Ham, again, Nuno Espirito Santo, like I said on my previous preview and predict episode, that he's got them, seems to be all firing on all cylinders, as much as they can be with the firepower that they've got up front in Bowen, Wilson, Castellanos, Somerville coming back now as well is coming back at the right time for West Ham. And with that being said, I do expect them to continue their good form, and I do have this game down as a 2-1 win to Brentford. Newcastle-Brighton. Now, Newcastle, in dire straits at the moment. A lot of talk about Eddie Howe possibly leaving for a better job, or I should say, a bigger club. In the summer potentially, and it seems as though there's a few names in the squad that are also going to be looking to head out of St James's Park by the end of the season. On Brighton, on the other hand, they have won the 6 out of their last 8 games. They're unbeaten in their last 5. It was a much needed, I guess, propulsion over the last few weeks for Hertzler and his team, just to, kind of get a positive out of the season, because before, the last 2 or 3 months, it seemed like they were kind of going to be stuck in that middle of the table. But now they do look potentially on course for a European place for next season. And of course, Brighton have been in there in Europe in previous seasons recently, and they'd hope to obviously secure that type of income and secure that those competitions for next season going forward. That being said, Brighton have looked pretty good away from home recently. Newcastle have obviously, not done so well either. They've lost 4 of their last 4 straight in the Premier League. That being said, I don't think it can get much worse than what it already is for Newcastle and Eddie Howe at the moment. Brighton could turn up and absolutely turn them over, but I don't think, again, at St James's Park, that will happen too easily. So I'm going to go for this game as a 2-2 draw. I think there are going to be goals, but I don't think Brighton will be able to muster, the performance that it needs to, that is required in order to take 3 points from Newcastle. Then we go on to Wolves versus Sunderland. Now, both of them coming off of losses in their last games. Wolves, since beating Liverpool at home, have lost 4 in their last 5. Sunderland, on the other hand, losing 5-0 at home is obviously never an easy sight, especially for those home fans. And it was quite surprising to see how it all unfolded. Obviously, Sunderland, at the start of the game, tried to be clever and play out from the back, but Forest saw that coming and were able to overload them in terms of the press and to generate chances, and that's why obviously they came out victors and to a great deal as well. The one thing I would say, and I did hear about this on TalkSport as well, the fans leaving, I think it was around 3 or 4-0, the home fans. There's a few people that agree with it, that why would you want to stay when your team's losing 3 or 4-0? For me, on the other hand, especially if I am every week, every match week going, paying customer for Sunderland, for the season that they've had, but also for the season before to get into the Premier League, I don't see why you would lose that much faith, leaving that early in a game. Maybe, some people have, it's a Friday night, we have to go home, but at the same time, it's your team. They only play once or twice a week, and less so obviously at home. For me, it's just, I don't see why that is the case, and for me, obviously that kind of paints a picture. There's some fans that they're almost getting a bit too drunk on the achievements that they've had already in the Premier League this season, and not so happy when something bad happens in that sense. So anyway, that result is by the by. With this game, Wolves looking as they did against Tottenham, they didn't do too much, and Tottenham really didn't do too much either in that game. And Tottenham, even though I did predict them to win 3-0, albeit they only won 1-0, Wolves didn't look too great in either department, defensively or attacking either. That being said, though, I do think Sunderland might turn up this time. Again, it's similar with teams like kind of Brentford in the mid-table. They still are within reach of European places, but it doesn't look too realistic to say that's the aim at this time. But managerial on the managerial side for Sunderland, I can't see him being happy to just kind of roll through the next 4 games and the last 4 games of the season and be happy with any lackluster performances, especially setting a tone for the summer and eventually bringing in new faces. A lot of players will still have a lot to prove to the manager. So with this game, I'm going to go 2-1 Sunderland. Again, Sunderland probably look the most likely to win the game, and they have more to play for. Wolves are down and out. Sunderland, have an outside chance of Europe, but again, we'll see what happens there. And now for Arsenal versus Fulham. Now, of course, Arsenal, having gotten the result, I would say, that probably Arteta wanted away from home in Madrid this evening. I think it was job done in their eyes, and it was the game that we probably all expected. It was a flurry of defensive hard work, but also glimpse chances, and I think at the end of the day it was a fair result. And it will obviously tee it up for a nice second leg at the Emirates. Of course, we do expect, I think, Arteta to pull through and probably grab a 1 or a 2-0 win in that game against Atletico, but it won't be easy. Then, in between that, Arteta now has to juggle this game against Fulham, which is, it's a must win. And this goes the same with Man City as well. Given the calendar and the schedule, how it is, Arsenal play 2 days before Man City play against Everton away. And Arsenal will obviously look to put on that kind of mental pressure to City and to Pep Guardiola to grow that gap, albeit for a few days. Fulham, on the other hand, again, like I keep saying, it's very tough to kind of see where they're at. They're very up and down in terms of consistency, and I just don't see anything more than a 2-0 win to Arsenal here. I think they get the job done. I do think they have tougher fixtures in the Premier League coming up. However, that being said, they should be able to get this victory here and maintain their position in the table. Bournemouth versus Crystal Palace. Now, Bournemouth are a team that, Iraola is on that kind of, that wave of he knows he's going out of the door soon. That being said, it's still all to play for them. They're in 7th spot at this moment in time. They're 1 point off of Brighton and 1 point ahead of Chelsea in 8th. So Iraola, I'm sure, even though he's leaving in the summer, he will definitely want to try and propel Bournemouth into the European spots and give them something to cheer for ahead of next season. And then Crystal Palace, for them, it's a question of, similar to teams like Arsenal, and Forest and Villa. How do they handle, the schedule of going away to Eastern Europe to play against Shakhtar in their Conference League semi-final, and then they don't really have anything to play for on the Premier League side. But again, as an outgoing manager himself, does Glasner try and field as strong of an 11 as possible in the Conference League, and then bring in his kind of subs in the Premier League? It remains to be seen. And that being said, I think Bournemouth do have a bit more than Palace in this regard, but I think it is going to be a tight game, and that's why I'm going to go for a 2-1 win to Bournemouth. Now, this is obviously, I think, in terms of just pure rivalry, and obviously with the way the table is shaping up and the points in between them, Man United versus Liverpool is the game of the weekend. United obviously coming off of the win against Brentford the other day, 2-1, albeit it wasn't convincing, but we got the job done. And sometimes you have to win ugly, although that is a question mark of mine recently of Michael Carrick and the players, is that we haven't been too easy on the eye of recent weeks, although we have gotten the points when we needed them. Aside from that result against Leeds, it is still a question mark, and it is something I'm going to be talking about in another video pretty soon, where I look at the overall picture of Carrick. Will he get the job? Should he get the job? And if not, who is next in line, or at least who should Ineos and the Glazers be looking at moving forward into next year, hopefully in the Champions League? With Liverpool, on the other hand, obviously Everton, they beat Everton again at the Hill Dickinson, and with Ekitike gone, I was foreseeing Isak maybe needing a few extra games to try and get himself into the rhythm and to the match fitness, especially for this run-in of the Premier League season. But he did get a goal himself after a long period out, and both teams, it's fair to say, they leak goals, and there's not many clean sheets that have been given between them. That being said, I think this game has the potential to be a barnstormer. Obviously, I think quality-wise, it's not going to be like a PSG versus Bayern Munich by any means, but this game, in any season with any team in any era is always going to have the potential to be a great game. So I am expecting goals in this one. I think given where both teams are, they have been, kind of on and off the boil, more so Liverpool than Man United, but again, United haven't been convincing as well as the run has been since Carrick took charge. But again, being a home game, Liverpool, it's without Mo Salah and just not looking totally convincing going forward, even with Isak coming back. I'm going to go for Man United 3, Liverpool 2. So yeah, that's going to be a one to watch. I'm can't wait to watch this game. It's going to be a thriller. And then we go into Villa versus Spurs. Now Villa, like I previously have mentioned before, going into the European semi-final against Forest on Thursday, and we'll see obviously how that brings up and again how that affects the team selections for both teams going into the Premier League weekend. And then we're looking at obviously Spurs, which they did get the win against Wolves. Again, not convincing, but they did have the better of the chances between the two. Roberto De Zerbi has said that, including the Wolves game, they have to win the last 5 games. Obviously, they've got the one under their belts. I just can't see them winning. I really can't see them winning against the Villa team that, Unai Emery, for as much of a kind of a mastermind he is for the Europa League and winning that competition, this is a test of him and how he kind of deals with his players and fixture congestion and all of that. And does the team, does the club have enough to just push them through into the Champions League qualification for next year? Because obviously the Europa League, in winning the Europa League is going to be no easy feat either. But yeah, Villa versus Spurs, like I said, I just can't see Spurs winning this game. I do see them maybe being more threatening on the attacking side. Yes, they've lost a lot of players to ACLs now and hamstring injuries like Solanke and obviously Xavi Simons with the ACL. But Kolo Muani, Mattis Tell, given how they are as players, they did bomb forward and stretch the legs of the Wolves defence. Weren't too clinical in front of goal and the chance creation in that sense, but I can see them scoring at Villa Park, but I can't see it being enough, and that's why I'm going to go for Aston Villa 3, Tottenham 1. Then on to the final 2 fixtures. So we are looking at Chelsea versus Nottingham Forest. Now, of course, like I said, Chelsea winning in the FA Cup semi-final. Interim coach Callum McFarlane, I think, given what we saw, I think it was his first game as interim after Maresca left away to City, that Chelsea put in a better performance than I think everyone expected. That being said, McFarlane in the FA Cup semi-final did a good job at what I just said previously is, making sure they have that foundation to play, just seeing the game how it should be treated as an FA Cup semi-final, get the goal, defend for your life when we're getting, when the opposition are coming, but also retaining possession, making sure we create chances. They didn't look obviously, 10 out of 10 going forward, Chelsea, but I think they can cause any team a great deal of pain on their day. So, that being said, Chelsea, I do think, have goals in them, which I'm going to give them 2 in this game. Forest, on the other hand, Vitor Pereira has, especially over the last 2 games, they've scored 9 in their last 2 games, so they're quite evidently got some threat going forward. Morgan Gibbs-White chipping in, Chris Wood chipping in, Igor Jesus chipping in as well. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. And again, I think it's going to be one of those games where I can't really call it, and I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw. And that one, hopefully, for Forest's sake, will give them enough, going into the last 3 games of the season after this weekend to get them out of that relegation battle. Finally, on to Everton versus Man City. Now, Everton, I think, were unlucky against Liverpool. Obviously, we had Beto going off with the concussion the other day. And, with Thierry Barry, he is kind of almost a similar type of player with Beto, but doesn't have that kind of movement where Beto seems to be able to generate those chances, one-on-one with an on-rushing keeper. So it's going to be interesting again to see how Everton play this one and, how the game turned out against Liverpool. They were very compact defensively and it took a lot for Liverpool to finally break them down throughout the game and get the goals that they needed to secure the victory. But Man City, on the other hand, this is their final kind of assault, for the next few months. They're in an FA Cup final. They are in a position where if they keep winning their games, they will be breathing down Arsenal and just waiting for Arsenal to crack. And I think, again, there's no better person in this day and age, especially, than Pep Guardiola to apply that pressure and to set his team out the way it needs to be set to get a result in this circumstance. And, I'm going to make it easier here. I don't think Everton score, and I think Man City get 2 to get the win and get the 3 points that they so desperately need. And we're going to hit submit on those scores. There you go. So that's all, guys. Appreciate everyone tuning in to this preview and predict video. Really do enjoy them. Hopefully we'll get some kind of different effects and visuals for you guys over the course of the World Cup and into the next season when I do these and make it a bit more visually better. But on the other hand, we will keep the content coming. Like I said, Michael Carrick, Man United video will be coming soon. And of course, the World Cup content, which I cannot wait for, will be coming in the next few weeks as well. Going through all the teams, all the groups, predicting the group stages, the rounds, the knockout rounds, and of course, the winner. So with that, I am Jacob and I am signing out. Thank you very much for watching, and I will be back soon. Bye-bye.